Hey man, so when we look at data right now, data is like one of the hottest topics inside of the finance organization, even inside of the business. But it's getting away from insights and turning into action. So one of my first lead-off questions for you, Kaiser, is how can organizations get away from just having data to present and turn that into action?
I love that question because I was actually just reading the other day, I found this stat that said only 31% of executives believe that their organizations are data-driven. Wow. 31%. 2023, we've got tons of data, we have amazing tools, amazing processes, but people are still, we're not data-driven. Why? Because data-driven is meaning we take action on our data rather than, hey, I had another insight, or hey, here's another dashboard. You know, like, hey, maybe you could use this, right? And really it just falls by the wayside. So I think one big thing is context. Context, context, context. When you are just sharing data, a dashboard, or just sharing a quick report or whatever it may be, here's an insight maybe you can find. What's the context for this thing that I'm sharing with you? Are we looking at supply chain? Are we trying to do prediction disruptions? Are we trying to understand our sales better? What's the context I'm looking for from a business standpoint? That's number one. But also, what about from a data standpoint? Where did this data come from? What currency rates are we using? And a lot of that context are within our systems, right? So making sure, one, I use a tool that lets me permeate the context throughout all of my use cases, because that delivers clarity. And number two, what's the business context here? What are we doing? What are we doing with this? What's the point, right? And making that clear from the get-go rather than just, hey, let's do another exercise.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think I love your point on the context of it, because so many times in the office of the CFO in business, right, you get this fancy dashboard and people look at it, right, Kaiser, and they're like, what am I supposed to do with this, right? And I think as we get to the point where you're having that insight moving into action, where I always look at it from a point where when I want to give insight, when I want to give data, it's going to drive some emotion, right? I want somebody to feel a certain way when they look at revenue growth year over year compared to where it was last year, right? So I love that like context element. But like when you transition that from like context, a lot of it is speaking the business's language, right? When you look at the office of the CFO, that's a big gap that finance people have, is like speaking that business language. So taking it a step further on the context side, how can finance, how can business partners work together to meet that common ground from that communication aspect?
And I think that's the next step you have to take to build a data culture. Right? There's another C for us. Context, culture. We're just going to keep going with the C's, right? So the next step I have to take, number one, is I really want to communicate with my data side of the house of, hey, love the data you're delivering, but business data has to be delivered in business terms. So how can I work with you to make sure when you're delivering a dashboard, a report, an intelligent data app, whatever it may be, that it's delivered in business terms? Because me seeing a bunch of field IDs that I have no idea what it means and a bunch of null values, thanks, right? Like, wow, looks complex, thank you, see you later. So I think first it's collaboration between your business stakeholders and your IT stakeholders of, hey, I know you guys want to have incredible technology, but what we really care about is when you deliver business data, that it's in business terms. So how can we do that? And there's tons of technologies out there, right? That we can deliver that in, but it's making it clear between the CFO and the CIO, maybe having that conversation, and even down and cascading it, hey, it needs to be in business-friendly terms, or it's just noise. It's just zeros and ones, rows and columns rather than intelligence, right?
Exactly. And I think that talks about like the connection aspect of it, right? And like when you think about data silos, right? A lot of organizations are suffering where marketing is keeping their data, finance is keeping their data, operations is keeping their data. So this idea of bringing connection to data, right? That's a big problem for small, medium-sized, enterprise-level companies, right? And I think when organizations can break down that silo and bring that connection, right? You bring that conversation to the audience, right? Now you got people in the room, you got finance in the room, you got operations in the room having these great conversations, and it's not this anecdotal, right? Like I remember sitting in conversations and you put a number up on the board and like you look at it and sales is like, I thought that number was different, right? You bring that centralization to where now everybody's coming with that seat at the table to have that connection and have that conversation, right?